Michael Hawley. He has a lengthy history in usability and experience design, including working at Bentley, working at Staples, and we were very lucky to have him join us last year. He heads up our experience design department and is going to share with you some thinking around design and how you can use design as a point of competitive differentiation.
And I realize we're running up towards 9 o'clock here. I want to be respectful of people's time. So this will be a relatively quick presentation so that you can get on to what you need to get on to. But what I'm going to talk about is less of case studies and more of a concept, some concepts, some thinking that we've had discussions about internally about how we approach our designs. And it's actually a great follow-up to a lot of the examples that John mentioned, because you know what I'll go through here is that it's more than about usable design and defining a whole experience. And you know, so a lot of the adaptive path conferences and all the buzzwords are about experience design, customer experience, or and user experience. And what, just by way of definition, what we are thinking about when we say that is kind of the totality of some customers or users' interaction with a set of products or services with the company. So Aetna is a great example. It's more than just that interaction with the website. It's how does that experience fit in with the call that they made, with the things that they get in the mail, with that whole experience. What does it add up to for the customer? And when I say customer, I don't mean customer necessarily in just a retail and consumer. I mean, it depends on the environment that we're talking about. Customer could be, the internal customer of your application, or it could be, the management, the managers, or people who are consuming information. So I say customer, but that's kind of all-encompassing in this context. Just a little bit in why now we're talking about this and why other people, why all these buzzwords. It's kind of a natural evolution, at least, especially in the interactive space, I think, with regards to where things are being developed now. You can think back 20 years ago, things were being marketed and sold based on how many features it had, how fast it was, how reliable it was, and you could differentiate yourself that way. We evolved then to, well, that's great, you have all these features, but I can't figure out how to use them, so there's a big push for usability. And when I was going through training in school, a lot of the people who had traditionally been in usability, if you've been through that before, it's all about how many errors did you find, and we did papers and papers on severity ratings of errors and all that type of thing. So it's all about making sure that the number of errors and the usability was, errors were decreased, usability increased. But now, I think what people are recognizing, and John, you talked about a little bit, there's lots of people doing this work, and we've evolved there. To a certain degree, we've done pretty well with usability. It's more now than just, does it have any errors? Are we defining an engaging experience? Are we providing value? Is it emotionally connecting with our customers? And that's where we are now. And you can see this manifest itself in changes in organizations, amount of spending in this. This was a survey done last year by the consultancy. They called it usability, but it's really dollars towards user experience design and all the things that are wrapped around that, not just usability. And you can see this evident in messages that we hear as consumers. You've seen the Cadillac commercial about, when you turn your car on, does it return the favor? That's about the emotional experience that you get in using these products. It's not just about does the door lock and does the thing turn on. Staples, I worked at Staples for a while, and it was really, their whole brand is defined around that experience of that was easy. It's not just the website, it's not just the store, it's everything about it that you're seeing here. And then the VHIX commercials, if you've seen those, how can we define this user experience? And they had, the little sniff, new car smell coming out of your computer, that type of thing. But, that's the idea. We're talking about the whole experience there. So, but when you see this, you might think, well, that's just marketing. Is this not what we're talking marketing? And to a certain degree, yes. But I like to think, and trying to think of it differently. If we think of the brand or the whole user experience as everything here, I think there's marketing and there's design, and they work together, obviously. But I think of them different as marketing, getting the word out about your products or services, or how you're going to kind of communicate that. Whereas experience design is defining that in context, actual use, having that build on and matching the marketing messages that you have out there. So they're in partnership, and this is really driven home for me with my experience at Staples. And John, you mentioned it. Traditionally, designers or usability was in the technical, part of IT budgets and all that type of thing. At Staples, when I was there, they changed it so that the quote-unquote usability group was moved to the marketing area. And we had a lot more leverage, we had a lot more cooperation with the people doing the marketing messages. And okay, if we're defining this website, how does that match with what we're trying to go to market with? How does it match with the messages that we're having out there, and having them interplay off each other? So what I want to talk about then is, if we're talking about experience design and how this meshes with marketing and the whole experience, how do we go about getting there? What's the design methodology that can get us to this space that's considering all this stuff? So I think of it as kind of two ends of a spectrum. On one end, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, a traditional user-centered design, where the user is at the center of your different design activities, and you're including them and thinking about them along the way. Versus genius design on the other end. Genius in quotes, this is not something I termed or anything, but just to kind of get the idea across, that why don't we just have good designers who know how to do this, right? And so there's kind of two ends of the spectrum. So with user-centered design, and you just see here the definition from Wikipedia. Again, I think of if you're familiar with the UPA poster, about all the different activities along the way, cognitive walkthroughs and usability testing and prototyping and all the things that you think of there, and even just kind of having the user at the forefront all the time. So I think you understand the benefits of this. What people who advocate the genius design type of approach might call a risk is, you're thinking about what users want and what they tell you that they want, but is that really what they need? And are we thinking of kind of the transformative experience, the new types of things? And so if you follow U-Test discussion group, there was a conversation a month or two ago, and Jared Spool put out a question. And I think he's good in that, he's obviously controversial, but he's being critical of us in an attempt to kind of improve, deliverables and the quality of work from our industry. So he raised a question, is user-centered design the right way? Can you name me one innovative product that is a result of user-centered design? Or are we just kind of iterating and kind of generally improving, just doing what customers tell us they want? And is that really the way to do it? Think about that, but I'll just kind of, for purposes of time here, kind of give you an example. It reminded me of, if anybody's seen this video of what if Microsoft developed the packaging for the iPod. Has anybody seen that video? And they start with this, here's the iPod packaging, right? And Apple, they don't have usability engineers, right? They have designers. Microsoft, on the other hand, has hundreds of user experience and usability designers. And so as you watch this video, it's hilarious because it's true that if you had all these Microsoft people in there, let's get more brand image. It's got to be on brand, and we got to display the benefits of the product, and where are the system requirements, and all this other stuff, and you end up with this hodgepodge. I should have included a link to it, but you can find it on YouTube. What if Microsoft developed the iPod packaging? And so this is the, kind of an example or just representative of the risk of listening to customers and user-centered design and getting, the customer says, well, I want to know, is this a rebate? Or I want to know the system requirements, and maybe you end up with this. So just something to think about there. On the other end of it, you have the genius design, and it kind of plays in with the last example that, people talk about Steve Jobs as, he's a designer, he just comes up with this stuff. Why don't we get good designers who have experience and they can help us? And we get this a lot as an agency where we're trying to sell to the client that they should do some upfront research. We need to better understand the competitive environment and your customers. And from their side, it's often, well, you guys have done this before, and we're hiring you because you have this expertise, right? So you're geniuses. Do this for us, right? And yes, you can point to some examples. And really, the thing here is that it's focused on problem solving. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and have a designer think towards that end. If you use an example that I thought of that is kind of representative of genius design, you think of Palm Pilot. I don't know if anybody had an original Palm Pilot, but I did, and I loved it. It was one of the things that I think got me into product design and user experience and usability and all that, because it was awesome. It was so intuitive, and the graffiti, I get caught right up into that. And it was the vision of one person. He had very limited budget. He didn't have a bunch of researchers. He maybe did a little prototyping himself with like the wood block. I don't know if you've heard of that story. He had a wood block that he carried around to get the form factor right and that type of thing. But that was really it. And he had a vision, and the vision was specifically, it needs to do this, it needs to cost $299, it needs to have no hourglass cursor. He had a specific vision, and it was his vision, his design, that pushed through, that ultimately proved success. I think the drawback of the genius design approach, though, that you have to keep in mind is, yes, it's a great success story, but it would have been better if that was his first foray, first project into this.
And didn't they do a lot of user testing on that, too?
Not really. If you read kind of the business case studies, they only had 6 months to get it to market. They had like $1 million budget, and most of it was spent on industrial design and getting the thing made. So they might have done that in subsequent iterations, but the original kind of idea, the original design, the innovative part of it was more genius. But like I said, what happened? You ever heard of grid pad size? Have you ever heard of the zoomer? And I think the lesson learned there is it's great if you have talented designers, if you get lucky, but not all of us have that flexibility and that opportunity. So a way to think of this then is, can we have a mix of the best of both approaches? And that's kind of what we're thinking about, is how do you have all the benefits of the user-centered design, the iterative approaches, the involving of the customers and the users, but yet not lose sight of innovative ideas and put the designers in a position where they can be thinking about those things and thinking about innovation. And kind of one of the key hooks that we're buying into, I think, is leveraging our view of personas and getting immersed in the customers. And so the benefit is doing the user research kind of gets you thinking about the customer, and if you think specifically about a couple different aspects of those personas, things that would motivate them, things that drive their enjoyment, those are the things that you can be thinking about to infuse some of that innovative ideas into the iterative user-centered design process. So again, not trying to coin terms here, just trying to give you some ideas to think about and talk about what we're thinking about with regards to how we approach a user-centered design, genius design, kind of melded together to deliver the customer experience more than just kind of usability. And then this builds off, the last slide here builds off the last topic of conversation in your talk, John, is, okay, what are we going to need? What are we going to need in terms of skills and disciplines and people to be able to get this done? And I think it's, to your point earlier, it's a mix. It's a hard mix to get, but you have the user-centered design, but also the last 3 bullets here, I think, are different than what we traditionally thought about in terms of usability engineering, with more of a focus on business process management, customer behavior, and that type of thing. And then skills that I look for, especially in a management position, regarding teamwork, things that are needed in a design environment to get these kind of innovative experience initiatives across. So rather quick, but like I said, I wanted to be sensitive to time and some conceptual ideas. I didn't know if anybody had any thoughts or questions or discussion about that.
On the skills slide, previous, as I read disciplines, I read disciple, and actually that's what you need. You need an evangelist, a disciple within the organization to be able to get the word out, and essentially that's a role I've been playing and members of my team have been playing to try to get the organization to shift its focus. But I think that's absolutely critical. So, just an observation.
Yeah.
When I need my glasses, but
It's a darker.
So I've been kind of in this position, from time to time. So my question is, sometimes you work with a really talented designer, got a brilliant idea that basically goes against all basic human factors principles, and you're trying to convince this person that it's low probability that it'll work, right? But they're really stuck, and they don't. And you have conflict. And how do you resolve that?
Well, I think you're right in that the context in which you're working has to be considered, and I don't know if I left that in there or whatever. Because if you're designing, it depends on the audience, is what I would say. And I would say that that's where the user-centered design process comes in, so validation. So for example, I'll use the Aetna Smart Source as an example. A new type of, you think of that kind of map navigation where you're navigating by, you're zooming in and out and you're navigating by topic that's visually, right? One hand you could say, well, that's, people aren't used to that. That's not playing on the experiences that they've learned and, building on past best practices. But if you take that to testing and you find, well, this audience that we're targeting actually doesn't have any preconceived notions of how to do that. This audience is not very computer savvy. And I think what Amy, I wasn't involved in that project, but what Amy says is striking that those types of people didn't have a lot of the kind of, those biases kind of built in, and so they were open to that. And so that's where that kind of innovative, yes, let's try it, let's test it, let's see if it works with the particular audience that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. I just had to test it with them.
Yeah.
It didn't work. They wouldn't believe it. It took some time, but I think that is the only resolution. So
I think that's why the balance is so key, because it's just amazingly powerful when you go to the highest executive in the company and you say, watch this user say this about your idea. It's just, you have to have some user feedback in the process, which I think why the middle ground is the good balance to have.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you because I agree that you follow all the usability handbook to go right, but that's pretty boring and not very innovative. And there's a lot of things, new technology and techniques that you have to try. I guess that's the answer. You just have to work with people, be open and test, early like crazy, and work with them to see what works and what doesn't.
We try to involve designers in the early wireframing process. So I can recall a brainstorm a couple of weeks ago where user experience designers were like, well, the user wants to know this at this point, and they might want to know this, and they might want to know that, and so we're wanting to put all that on the screen. The designer's like, no, you can't, no, like simplify. Do you really need that? Do you really need that? So constantly, so if we have the designers there, they're trying to push us in a direction. It's either really creative or just, focus and simplify. Do you really need that? That type of thinking can help early.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of base research you can point to about simplification and not overloading the screen. People scan, you don't read, you have to keep pounding it. I'm all for simplification, you have to keep that. But yeah, it's hard. You end up having to test though anyway.
If you're trying to sell and advocate for this process too, the middle ground is the much more realistic one, because you're never going to convince them that we can add too much to the project to do some of the more formal upfront research you might have wanted to do. It sounds great and it looks neat on your slide, but we need this by January 15th, and so we're going to cut that out for budget or time frame. So if there is some of like, let's use best practices, but do as much, quick and dirty review as possible, that seems to be 75% of the time. It seems to be what we hear from clients, that in a perfect world, that'd be great. Maybe we'll do all that testing and research next time when it means they didn't listen, and that would have been too late. But I think that's a more digestible way to sell it externally as an agency, but internally to other groups that may want to think about this kind of a practice going forward.
So just we're a couple minutes over, so I want to be sensitive to that. But just again, want to give you a little bit of a framework or inspire some thinking on your side, if it could help you in your work. So,
Thanks, Mark.